How are you managing this COVID and lockdown thing?
Well, I think taking each day as it comes is the only way. That's how I'm managing.
There is Namibian
We
Arts
don't do that.
Association. Namibian Arts Association. How are you?
Octophil.
I think he's on mute. He's doing something.
Yes, yes. Octophil.
And there's Trisha as well. How are you, Trisha?
Trisha.
Oh, Namibia, you are back. Hello? Namibia Arts Association. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. Oh, that's your name, Sebata.
I'm trying to log in from the other device because the internet is not properly.
It's not stable.
Working for me.
Oh, Sebata has just joined us.
Yeah.
Welcome, Ska.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. I think Mr. Shefa,
yes, please.
You could just maybe kindly introduce the topic and then we can take it from there.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
It's good to see you here. There's Scar and Cynthia, our guest today, and all of you guys to join us. Just to say, as a background to this conversation, at the back of our mind, are you getting me clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. At the back of our mind, we are into the days of 16 days of gender activism. And there are a lot of other programs going on nationally, internationally, and even including some organizations. They are doing on their own programs. And we also decided to participate this way in a unique way by hosting you guys to discuss issues. But because we are arts focused, we are going to determine how it should be in terms of our space, in terms of addressing the issues that are at hand. So I'll, for now, hand over to Valerie to introduce to us Scar and Cynthia before we officially begin the talk, the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shefa. This was Mr. Shefa, our curator for education and public programs. He's the driver of the Harare conversation. Welcome to Ka and Cynthia, our guests. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And may you kindly introduce yourselves. Oh, first of all, just as a reminder, our theme today, or our topic, is Silence is Violence, speaking through art. So I don't know who would like to start, or Cynthia. Over to you.
Okay, I can start. My name is Cynthia Marangwanda. I am a poet, both a page and spoken word poet, and also a published writer based in Harare.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. I am Sebata. Everyone knows me as Ka. I am a creative, a fashion creative.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies. Now on to our topic. We're talking about gender activism. We've decided, we deliberately put it as a female forum because according to statistics, women are the most vulnerable. So the first question I would like to pose to you is, there are many ways to communicate, or are there really many ways to communicate? And what are the challenges that you've faced to put these messages across regarding gender issues in your spaces?
Okay. Well, for me, as an artist, the way that I communicate is through words, the creative words that I come up with, and whichever platform I can find, whether it's through readings, recitals, or through the internet. The internet is very useful. It's just yeah. So whichever mediums I can find to get the message across, it's important. As for challenges, I think the challenge is always that the issues of gender are very polarizing in our society, and the moment that you try to bring up these issues in a conservative society like Zimbabwe, certain people will take certain views. They'll call you, a hardcore feminist, and or all of these things that or you hate men, or some of these tropes and cliches which are not true. When basically what I would be trying to do is just to highlight the need for balance and gender justice, which is important in society. So I think basically the misconceptions around what gender is and sort of the polarizing effects of bringing up the gender topic is really the main challenge for me.
Okay. Thank you for that, because misconception is, it's one of the issues that has been causing a lot of havoc. Thank you for that, Cynthia. Over to you, Ska.
All right. I convey my message through this basically, and I have been incorporating painting and into my design. And as Cynthia said, like the misconception of gender is it's pretty big in Zimbabwe, and especially as a designer, conveying message through dress is very difficult when I'm trying to portray like free women, liberated women. There are garments that I will use to do that, and I cannot sometimes share the message that I want to, because dress is such a huge part of, especially like gender-based violence, how women are abused because of the way they dress. And so the message sometimes is obscured by such things and such notions, but I do my best to try and convey the message the best way I can through the art.
Okay, thank you very much, Ska. I'd like to ask this question: is how would you like to interpret this title? Silence is violence. Is silence really violence? does art really speak?
I think silence is violence. It really is, because the number one cause of like perpetuating gender violence is that people who are abused don't speak out. So if you don't speak out, then you're part of the problem. So silence is violence. It's a type of violence. And if you don't speak, you won't be heard.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, for me, I actually look at it in two ways. It's ambivalent for me because, yes, I agree with what Ska said that obviously speaking out is important, but sometimes speaking out is not always in the best interest of the victim at times, because sometimes speaking out loud can actually get you into more trouble. Yeah, you can even face more violence. So sometimes silence can be a way to protect oneself. Um, and I don't think victims should ever be blamed for that. But I think it does become important that at a certain point you find ways to then speak out and use your voice. And I think, like, as an artist, this is where we can also be helpful to encourage, to empower, to uplift, to give hope through our messages and through our art, so that those who may be imprisoned in silence can see a way out. So yeah, that's the way I see it.
okay, it's a two-sided coin. Okay, you're saying we need to be helpful. How do we do it? Because honestly speaking, it's been difficult for people to really appreciate art or the work that we do. What are ways? What are the ways that we can use for us to actually be heard? Do we go around in one of those trucks and shout out, "Yes, art, art," those roadshow kind of things? How, this is what I'm trying to ask. How do we do it? You know, like with you, Cynthia, you are in the poetry and writing. How, and Sky, you're in your fashion world. How do we actually, how are we heard? What do we do for us to be heard?
For me
It's
personally, I think
go ahead.
for me personally, I think fashion is easy because there are garments that you can make and actually paint on the message or write the message or print it out onto a garment where people can then read and relay or relate to the message. It's sort of simpler because you're a walking billboard. You can literally wear what you want to say. So I think for fashion, it's sort of like do this ABC and your message can be conveyed. There are then some garments that I make that I feel connect to people emotionally, and therein lies a problem to me because I really cannot force an emotion onto someone. The way I design and create may not be what is and seen by the person when you see the garment or the piece I've made. So in one way it works. If you're making street art, streetwear, then you can actually literally convey the message that you want to convey on the garment.
Yeah,
that's very creative.
yeah. For me as a poet and a writer, it's not that easy because these are mediums that are not very accessible to the average person, especially in Zimbabwe. Outside it's different, but in Zimbabwe it's not. So it's not that easy. But I think one of the best ways to get the message across is through the internet, social media. It's become very helpful for us as writers because it's essentially set up in a way where it's almost set up for writers and poets. Because Twitter, you can just write a little, your little tweet and it can be a poem, or even on Facebook or whatever. So I think at this point, using the cyberspace, the internet, social media is probably the quickest and best way to reach people at this point.
All right, great. Social media, because everyone is on social media.
Yeah, especially on the lockdown period, everyone.
Yeah.
I have a question for Cynthia.
Yeah.
How do you convey your messages though to like marginalized communities who make up 60% of the population in Zimbabwe? Because then that only targets a certain type, a certain group of people who have access to the internet, who have access to gadgets. How can we help that art move forward to the marginalized communities, the ones who don't have access?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's actually something that I think needs to be addressed. It really does, because the rural population, as you're saying, not all of them have access to the internet. Yeah, so I guess in that case, you would actually need that sort of direct, direct interaction, isn't it, to actually go into the communities and meet with these people face to face and talk to them. And yeah, but sometimes resources and opportunities make that hard to happen. But I think it's very, very important, because it's useless to reach a quarter of the population and leave three quarters. You haven't done any, and usually the marginalized are the ones who need the messages more than the people who are, who have access to some of these things. So a very important point.
Food for thought, yeah? Yeah. Mr. Mchefa has a follow-up question.
Thank you, Valerie. It's more related to what Sky has been saying, but focusing on the fashion side. The art industry has been kind of elitist, where even if you want to move around in town looking for, beautiful local fabric that is designed with some cultural flair, it is often the most expensive. And not only is it elitist that way, but also appreciation of the art itself. Just like, Cynthia, if you are a writer, our consumption and how much returns you might make out of your writings, it's more appreciated in the developed world and in the urban areas than it is in the remote and the disadvantaged side. So, as part of the challenge that we are trying to talk about, what could be the remedy to at least considering that these cases of gender-based violence, they are more prominent and more pronounced, even in those remote places, for lack of coverage, so to say, and access to some critical services such as the police, the hospitals, and everything that makes them more vulnerable. How do you think you should navigate that to at least make sure that they're disadvantaged in terms of resources, in terms of financial status and everything? They get, sufficient just to break even this elitist approach to art and information dissemination strategies. What do you think about it?
Okay, I think that the greatest hurdle that we actually have is access to information in these remote areas. Like, if I tell you that people don't know what some things on the internet are, what a Zoom meeting is even, those are things that they need to learn. So once they learn them, it's then easier to share other information, to share the different art, to share different life skills on how to create the art, because they now have the information. So the first thing is actually access to information. I'm always saying this, that there needs to be access to information centers that are solely based on giving out information that is relevant to the context of rural people, as opposed to general information that everyone can access easily. There's so much information that, like, I'm coming from a rural area. I'm in town now because I came for another meeting on gender-based violence. But there's so much information lacking, just as a basic and fundamental right that they don't have access to information, and that's something that's very important. Once people know what's out there, they can teach them new things. So I think the first thing that needs to be taught or given is the access to information.
Wow. Yes, access to information. Yeah, I agree as well. Yeah, access to information is something that's very important because we find ourselves using a lot of gadgets and all sorts of things. There's a question from Sarah Moyo. Thank you very much. Sarah says, have the speakers considered TV and radio programs on art? Whilst our TV and radio channels are not many, programs sponsored by well-wishers may be a starting point.
Oh yeah, that's a very good idea, especially radio, because if we're talking about reaching the larger population, more people have access to radio than anything in this country. Because even if you have those phones which aren't smartphones, uh, they can access the radio. So I think definitely that is a very good way to reach people to be able to disseminate to a wider population of individuals.
Thank you, Cynthia. Scott, do you have something to say?
It's still the same thing for me, really, because I'm coming from a very marginalized area in rural Victoria Falls, and you find that the way people create art is by replicating someone else's art, and this is because they just don't know what other art is out there for them to do. Everyone is making a 30 centimeter giraffe in Victoria Falls because the next door neighbor is making a 30 centimeter giraffe. And it goes back to there's no access to information. If people knew that I can actually do poetry, do speaking as art, then there'd be so much more to do, there'd be more avenues. So there's just a long way to go in terms of just teaching people new arts, basically. But you don't have to always do the same thing. But there are so many limitations on the access to it. Radio, yes, but you'll find that in the outskirts of Big Falls, sometimes you can't even get radio access. There's probably one radio station and it's a community radio. So for you to then get your stuff out there from maybe Harare to the area, it's difficult. It will only cater for the people that are already in Victoria Falls. And so the information that's being shared is the same information. Everyone is then preaching the same thing because it's community radio. So they're just learning the things that they've always known, as opposed to learning new things from outside their area of vicinity.
So maybe ICT centers being set up, would that help?
Yes, that would help. You know, there are actually ICT centers. There's an information center in town, but it's in town in Victoria Falls. And the area that I come from, you have to want at least for $2 and you're trying to get information. What's the point of me getting into town for $2, coming back for another $2? That's $4 that I'm spending to go and access information. So you find that the information centers are actually not where the people are, and that needs to change, basically.
Wow, never thought of those ICT centers. Yeah, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, there's
quite a
lot of work.
Oh gosh, wow. And the well-wishers, as Sarah said, we're just hoping that the well-wishers are out there listening, and and also as institutions as well, we need to be able to talk to other institutions or individuals who would actually like to advocate on these kind of issues. Which leads me to my next item. Cynthia, you talked about the lockdown, and you're saying, yeah, especially the lockdown. The statistics show a lot of cases, some resulting in divorce, economic challenges, right? They came through quite a lot. So how have you artists come up with artworks or pieces of poetry or everything else? Have you had some time to reflect, or what was that period like for you? Or it's still going on, but the first part of it.
Yeah, for me it was actually a hectic period because I have a child and he was not going to school. So I was with him 24/7, and the restrictions, the movement, family. Which I think are some of the pressures that women also have to deal with. The domestic pressure that comes with lockdown. The domestic issues. So it was not as easy for me to be creative actually during this lockdown as it normally was for me. But still a good time, in everything you learn. So there was also a lot of inspiration coming out of even those challenges or whatever issues were arising.
Okay.
For me, personally, production came to a halt because I rely on fabric to make my art. And so I couldn't shop for fabric. I really couldn't do much except sketch and come up with ideas. But I'm glad that things now have sort of gotten back to normal and I can actually start creating the art that I've been thinking about. So I'm looking forward to that. But in terms of lockdown, because it just happened, it was like today's Friday, Monday, lockdown, we can't move. So I couldn't actually produce, I needed the resources and being in a different town and I get my fabric in Harare. So it was really difficult to actually on paper and in my mind. So I'm looking forward to creating a new collection coming up.
So we should be looking forward to Scar's collection very soon. Yay, can't wait. All right, thank you. We have a question to Scar. What means of community mobilization and advocacy have you applied in your target area? And what developments have emanated from your practices?
All right. I work for an organization called the Sunshine Trust in Victoria Falls. So what we have been doing is organizing workshops, talking to the artists within the rural communities because we find that the art that's sold at the Victoria Falls market in town is created in the rural areas. And so we have been trying to teach them how to create new art, how to not copy each other and replicate the same art. And also talking to them about valuing their art. Because you find people make the art, sell it for cheap because they're just trying to survive, basically. They're trying to sell something in order to get food on the table. Where someone will buy the art and go and sell it for thousands of dollars, yet they sold it for probably $3. So we have been trying to teach them how to value their art, how to manage their time and actually calculate how much time is spent on creating the art and also trying to create markets. I've also been trying my best to teach them how to use the internet to sell their art, to advertise their wares, because there's such the art industry is a global village. Like there's so many people looking for art but can't access it. And because Victoria Falls was solely based on tourists coming into the country to purchase the art, you find that when lockdown happened, people had art, but no way to sell it too. And people kept on creating because they assumed after a month the borders are going to be open, the planes are going to start flying in and they're going to start coming back in, but that's not the case. And so now we have to just rethink and see what else we can do. So we're trying to teach them how to sell their art online, how to open Facebook shops and things like that, how to just set up a Facebook page even, so that your art is seen and people can order it online because it's such a global thing and the market is huge and there's lots to be given and distributed in the art industry. So that's some of the stuff we have been doing and just teaching the young people how to value their art and how to create new art and also just learning new things because like I said, access to information is lacking. So the information that we get, we just share. It makes sense to do that because that's all we can do because of the limitations of the area and just location.
Oh, great. Thank you. So this is where the ICT centers come in. Yes.
Yeah.
And also that's where we can also have workshops to actually teach these people how to create a Facebook account, how to actually market their work online and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Ska. And then Sarah says, Ska's point about training artists not to copy each other's work is important. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And then we have a question to Cynthia, addressed to Cynthia. You have a focus on spirituality in Shona cosmology. Do you think matters such as GBV are systematically or institutionally engraved in the African psyche?
Wow. Oh, that's a really good question. Who is that? Yeah. No, I actually don't think that it's engraved in our psyche, because if you go back historically in pre-colonial times, women were the role of women, especially in a spiritual and a cultural level, they were very valued. Women are valued as mothers, anatete, as healers, as spirit mediums. Not to say that there were no issues, but if you go back in our history, women, they held that place. Even the fact that we have Nyanda statue being put up right now, it shows the importance of women before the arrival of colonialism. So it's not in the African psyche at all. A lot of the violence that we see nowadays, and a lot of it is coming from the pressures of living in a capitalist world, a globalized world, with so many pressures come. Uh, Men have to live up to certain standards. Trying to feed your children. In this rat race. So it's a very big misconception that people have that it's ingrained in our African psyche. We were not perfect, obviously. We also, just like anywhere in the world, if you look in medieval Europe, their treatment of women was horrible. They were having witch trials where they were killing women. So this idea that it's an African thing, it's not. At a certain point, people were backwards globally, right? But I think Africa was advanced during that time. And then for us, with the coming of the whites and Europeans and colonialism, we then went back, and the rest of the world advanced. And so we've taken this narrative and made it ours that we are these kinds of people. But if you actually study history, it's not in our psyche at all.
It's not in our psyche. Just so all you know, it's not in our psyche. All right. Thank you very much. If there are no questions or comments at this juncture, we have. Okay, so if we're looking at, okay, we have something here from Rutendo Bako. She says, I totally agree with Cynthia. Women have always been considered as superior spiritual beings. Yeah. And then Sarah says, oh, thank you, Rutendo, for that comment. And Sarah is asking or saying, what also is the artist community doing about lobbying governments to introduce laws that give resale royalties to local artists? There are lots of African artists, painters, sculptors whose works are bought for modest amounts and then sold for large amounts or sums in later years, which local artists don't benefit from that. So what is the artist community doing about lobbying governments to introduce laws? I think maybe I will throw this question to Mr. Machefa.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
You want me to try and introduce and address the one on the laws,
Yes,
which I thought the practicing artist would be quite knowledgeable in terms of how they want it to be. But what
start
from
off with you and then them.
Yes, but apart from that, what I feel as a spectator or as an interested person in art is that there are so many ways in which artists express themselves. So in this case, we have got someone who is a designer, someone who is a writer. Others are musicians. Some are comedians. And all those, they have different ways of expressing themselves or addressing issues. But then we don't seem to have some national legal position that will say, if these are registered artists who address whatever fundamental issues artistically, then they have to be somehow be protected by the law. We have seen circumstances where you are a musician, and it said your song cannot be played on air, which I think is not fair from the artist side. I've seen circumstances where if you're a comedian, you might have content that is deemed to be violating some other political space, which I think, like you are saying, if it's a legal environment, if it's about lobbying the government to introduce laws, uh, it's not only about resale, it's not only about royalties, it's more about the space under which they work. So the relationship should be such that it allows them to be protected, both in terms of what they are supposed to get out of it and how they are supposed to freely, execute what is in their artistic, way of doing business. So I think to just limit the laws to what they should get would be kind of selfish. It's like we are only talking about pirates, but we don't want to address the broader issues. So for me, I don't know, but I think Cynthia and Scar would be the best to tell us how they feel they should be assisted if they are going to lobby or if they are going to take the government to task in terms of addressing these laws.
Over to you, lady. Thank you, Ms. Shefa.
Okay, for me personally, I remember 2 weeks ago, I was in a meeting with the Youth Parliamentary Portfolio people, and I remember raising the question, the issue of that art is actually not considered a viable thing in Zimbabwe. It's like, oh, you're an artist, it's not even a job. So the first thing I think, yeah, then it's to have them value the art. Once there's value placed on the art, you can then argue that I want this law. I want to be able to make garments locally and sell them locally. So please ban the import of this fabric or this line, or just have solely local garments stocked in local shops. So the first thing would have to be to create value around our art, to actually show that art is important, it's a viable trade, it can actually change the economy if it's given the right platform, and if it's even seen as something tangible. That's the problem in Zimbabwe, that art is not seen as something tangible. It's seen as an entertainment source. And what they value and what they consider art is not necessarily every single type of art. It's music, it's drama, probably acting. That's what is considered art. Everything else is, we don't know what they're doing. We don't even know what to teach artists. So that in itself. So you can't then ask for them to put laws when they don't understand what art is. So understanding of art is what is actually needed first. And then you can push for everything else, because from what I was saying to the committee was the youth have art that they do. They want to be able to sell their wares. You find that if someone is invited to showcase art somewhere, they can't even afford to fly to the place, get accommodation, or even enough money to create a collection. If I've been invited to New York Fashion Week, but I can't attend because I don't have the resources. I can't afford to fly myself there. I can't afford to make a solid collection. And so maybe if a fund was actually created for young people to say, if a young person is going to represent the country, this is then allocated to them because they're going to represent us as a country. But they don't do that for us. They do it for other things like modeling, etc. So I think value should be placed on our art first, and then we can ask for more. Once people identify that art is an important part of our culture and economy, then we can push for more.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I think it, like you said, it starts off by the appreciation of the art or art itself. I love your take on this one. Cynthia, would you perhaps have anything to
Well, I mean, just agreeing with her, because if you look at other countries, art and entertainment play a big role in the economy. Bollywood, uh, even places like in the Nordic countries, Finland, they have a big metal metal music scene, and people come and they invest money. So in other countries, they see the economic value of art and entertainment, which I think it's marginalized here. That they don't take it seriously as something that can be a money maker. So probably once that gets in, because people value money, once they realize that if we actually invest in this, we are going to get huge financial returns, then I think it can also motivate them to create an enabling environment for art.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Quite a lot of sense. And then thank you for that. We have Rutendo Bako who's saying, are artists taking up opportunity to work with NGOs and trusts working in communities to really have the grassroots perspective of what's happening in communities? The GBV stats increased by quite a wide margin during the COVID-19 restrictions.
I think it's something as artists we should definitely do. I personally cannot lie that I've done a lot of work with NGOs. I haven't, but I would love to get that real grassroots sort of in interaction with people and to really see what is going on, because just moving in Harare and the art circles, you don't really get exposed. So sometimes it even narrows your art, because once you have that wider perspective, you can be more inspired and you can create from a much wider perspective. So I think it's a very good idea that I would also love to explore.
Something new?
Okay. As an artist who actually works for an NGO, I feel like I'm really deep in it, because it's practically my job. I create to share and to just relay the messages through the art. So we are always looking for artists who want to share their message. But the thing is, in the NGO sector, much as we're trying to help communities, it's really pro bono work. And as an artist as well, I understand that I don't want to work for free. I want to be paid for my work. So it gets difficult to actually invite people with, oh, come and do your spoken word. And then you just want them to do that, but without any major benefits to them. So there needs to be a balance. If someone is going to offer to do it, then they need to understand why they're doing it for free and how that's going to help them. Is it to help them, or is it to help the community they're sharing their art too? So I do what I do because I want to see like women empowerment. That's my thing. So I create my art and I teach all the women how to create make garments as well, and they're teaching their daughters how to make garments, because it's important to me for them to have economic freedom so that they don't have to rely on anyone else to make things happen for them. So I think when we're asking artists to come through, share their art, it has to be a balance. The artists need to understand why they're doing it in the first place. Is it for exposure? Because the exposure train is all nice and well, but sometimes we have to get off it. And that's a decision that the artists themselves need to make. So the NGO community, I think, is very open. They're like, yes, come through, bring your art. But we can't really do anything for you except expose you. So I think it's really up to the artist.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think that if you're doing it from the heart, it's not really an issue too. It's almost like you're volunteering, isn't it? If you're doing it from the heart, let's say if it's GPG or whatever issue, I would, if it's a cause that I really believe in, I wouldn't mind, doing it without payment, because it's giving back in a way. So, yeah.
And it's something that you love doing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a comment from Sarah who says, wow, ladies, enjoying the discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you. And then we have a question from Brian Kauma. Thank you very much. He says, are artists focused on local consumers or their main target audience is exports, where there is more money?
Yeah, well, for me, like money was never the motivation for why I did art. I'm a born artist. I've been writing since I was a child, and so for me, it's just it's reaching whoever can be reached by the arts, you know. But obviously, my people first, because it doesn't really make sense to create work and you want a stranger to to appreciate it more than your own people. So for me, I would love for Zimbabwean people first, and then African people, and then the rest of the world to be able to, because also most of the stuff that I write is tailored to my environment anyway. So for me, money is not really the motivation. It's really just to send a message and to make a positive impact through the art. If that's in Zim, that's fine. Africa, that's fine. The rest of the world, fine still.
Great, thank you.
For me, my art is devoted. I do it because I love it, but I also do it for the monetary value. I'm creating clothes to sell so that I make a living off that. And for the longest time, I was creating for the Zimbabwean market. But then, because my pieces are bespoke, I found that I was being limited because everyone wanted the government to come with a picture from a magazine. And so that limited my creativity. I was no longer creating, I was basically a tailor. And so I stopped catering for the local markets because I've just realized that it's not my target audience. I'm not creating the work that I'm creating simply for the Zimbabwean person. I'm also creating for a wider audience. And that's something I've also been trying to teach the young ones that are a part of our program, that it's profit is not a dirty word. Like, you can literally just create your art, do the things that you love, but share it with a wider audience, and that's okay. So I'm always looking for new markets outside the country because I feel as if communities, they understand the message that I'm trying to portray more. And also because my clothes share a message about the Zimbabwean woman. So I'm trying to get that message across so that other people can see what's happening in Zimbabwe and see that image of the everyday Zimbabwean woman through my garments. So if they have a piece of that in Norway or Switzerland, whatever, that's good for me. At least they can tell a story. They can be like, oh, I got this in Zimbabwe. It's about blah, blah, blah. And then that makes sense to me. So I definitely do create for a wider audience.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I like your honesty. I love your honesty. Well, thank you for that. I think sometimes as creatives in Zimbabwe, we get this pressure that we should do stuff for the Zimbabweans. You know, why are you doing it for the Zimbabweans? Why aren't you doing, why aren't you doing it for, yes, for the Zimbabweans? And then people are putting so much pressure and you're thinking, but that's not me. I have a target audience and this is what they like. So I think it's all about where you feel comfortable in and what makes sense for you, and most importantly, what brings food to the table. Women has got to eat. Yeah, gotta eat. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I have quite a number of questions, and Pretend would also like to jump in, but before that, there's a follow-up to Cynthia from Brian. How do we account for low consumption locally, even when the nation economy is at greater distress?
Can you repeat the question?
Okay. How do we account for low consumption locally, even when the nation economy is at great distress?
Is in great distress.
In great.
In great. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Is not in great distress.
It's not okay. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Well, for me, I'll speak as a writer. It seems that in Zimbabwe, this appreciation of literature and literary arts, it's not very high. I'm not really sure why there isn't really much of a reading culture or much of a culture of appreciation of literature. It's different with other art forms like music, maybe, drama and so on. But I guess because they're more pop culture, more mainstream. But when it comes to writing, poetry, literature, I just think the culture is not there. People, it's not inculcated in people. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they see it as something that's for the elites, or it's foreign, or something. And I really think that actually, there needs to be some sort of I don't know, awareness or drives or campaigns to really get people to realize the power in literature. Because there's so much, books, poetry. You can open up worlds in terms of your thinking, your perspectives. Yeah. So for me, I just think it's the lack of the culture of 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 that as pertaining to the literary arts. I'm not sure about other art forms, but when it comes to literature, that's how I see it.
Oh, great. Thanks, thanks, thanks for that, Cynthia. And then also to you as well, a question.
Yeah.
Your novella Shards, the central character navigating theologies in a modern frame. Do you find one faith being more patriarchal and leaning more towards GBV than the other?
Yes. Christianity is very patriarchal. Everything about the religion, starting from the fact that the original sin is attributed to a woman, Eve, it goes all the way down. Verses which talk about women cannot speak in church, verses that condone rape and slavery of women. The fact that the Trinity, there's no female figure, all the major figures in the Bible are men. And even the church culture, because if you look at churches, it's the women are the majority congregation, but they're always led by men. And these very, very conservative values of what a proper Christian woman is supposed to be, all of these are everything about Christianity is just set up to, be conducive for violence. So yeah, definitely, Christianity is very patriarchal, and I think the patriarchal values then open it up much more to gender violence and domestic violence.
Thank you very much. I love that. Before we go to Rutendo, there's another question. It has been stated, yes, it's a question. It has been stated that asking a woman not to dress inappropriately with the justification that they will not be physically abused is like asking a black man not to be shot by the police. What are your thoughts on this iniquited streams of thoughts, and how can they be changed?
Okay. I actually read that. Hey, I saw a link that talked about, that women are raped, abused, attacked because of the way they have been dressing. And I don't subscribe to that notion at all. My dress should not be an invite or should not provoke you to do anything. And especially because not necessarily abuse doesn't happen to all the women alone or all the girls or women wearing miniskirts. Young children are being raped. So you can't justify a person raping a 6-year-old and say, no, they did it because she was wearing something skimpy.
Yeah.
Society, it's all in your mind. So my dress, what I do, should not be, it doesn't make sense that that's what drives people to abuse or hurt women, because it's just dress. It's definitely in the mind of the abuser. The problem is the abuser, not my dress code, not the dress code of women. That's what I think and feel. Like, it makes no sense that women should dress a certain way to avoid being abused. That makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just an excuse to police women's bodies. People just use that as an excuse. Because elderly women are raped and they'll be fully dressed. As she's saying, young children as young as 2 or 3 years,